Angry parents, national coach conferences, academic textbooks, angry tennis coaches, lost players, successful lessons, dreadful lessons. What a year it's been with my tennis coaching. Welcome to the My Tennis Coaching podcast for my last podcast of 2024. And in today's episode, we're going to look back on my year, what's not gone well. There's been struggles at times, and my plans for 2025. In December 2023, I sat down at this very table and wrote down my plans and goals for 2024, like most tennis coaches do. And I'm really big believer of goal setting. I think goal setting is really, really important. It gives you something to focus on, something to drive towards, to go towards. So every year at this time, I sit down at this very table and I will plan out my year. Normally, I do it on paper. This year, because now I have the podcast and the YouTube channel, I'm going to commit it to video. But before we look at 2025, we need to look backwards at 2024. And I really encourage all tennis coaches to do this process as well, because tennis is ever evolving, it's ever moving, sports science is ever changing, the world that we know is changing every single day, and we need to keep up with the times. So I really encourage tennis coaches to go down that path and try and develop some type of goal setting. You don't have to commit to video like me, but you can just write it down as well. But I believe making your goals public, whether it be to your friends or family or to your coach mentor, it gives you a sense of accountability. So let's look back over the past 12 months. What were my goals going into 2024? Did I achieve them? What went well and what didn't work so well? So the big goal this year, and I talked about on last week's podcast, was to speak at a national coaches conference, because I really want to try and raise, one, my profile, because I really enjoy working with coaches. I love networking with coaches, and coach conferences are, generally speaking, where you get a lot of the most experienced coaches together in the same place. You have some expert speakers, and it's just a great networking event. It also gives me an opportunity to be challenged on some of my beliefs as well, but also present some of my opinions and ideas. And that was the main goal. And I'm not going to go over what I talked about in last week's podcast. You can go back and listen to that. But I achieved that. I spoke at 3 national coaches conferences. I spoke at the Tennis South Africa National Coaches Conference, PTR UK, both as keynote speakers, which was a big surprise for me to be the main speaker or the headline speaker. And then obviously a few weeks ago I spoke at the British Tennis Coach Association National Conference as well, and had the pleasure of closing the on-court presentations on the second day. Really, really humble and just an amazing experience to speak at those 3 events. Tennis South Africa was virtual, so that was a weird situation, speaking to hundreds of coaches, thousands of miles away, but delivering again some ideas around ecological psychology and ecological dynamics. The PTR UK and the BTCA conferences are both in person. Again, completely different setup than I've ever been used to. I've always delivered someone else's content, the national governing bodies. This was my content, and it made me feel a little bit uncomfortable, and there was a couple of sleepless nights leading up to these events, but I definitely think it gave me, 1, the confidence to do more. 2, it made me really look into the theory and the methodology deeper, because if I'm going to present this as something that I truly believe in, I've got to make sure it's backed up with evidence and science as well. I would listen to podcasts, read books, so when I presented the information, I could present it from a position of authority and make sure that I knew what I was talking about. So that was my main goal this year, and I achieved it. And I'm really happy and really proud to have spoken at all 3 conferences. Second huge goal for me this year was to relaunch and redesign my website. So mytenniscoaching.com started, I think 3 or 4 years ago now at this point. And it just started out as a information website. So I just put on blog posts and information about my coaching, and people, if they wanted to, could book lessons to it. It's just a normal, general tennis coach website. Around 18 months ago, I started uploading some of my educational content, so webinars and videos, and people really took an interest to it. So I tested out the idea of a membership website, and I just wanted a platform in which I could help, educate, develop, and support coaches who have an interest in ecological dynamics. And yes, I could produce free content and put it out in the world. And with tennis coaches, what I found from working in the coach education, coach development space, most tennis coaches just want free stuff. They just want drills, they just want games. And we know from ecological psychology and ecological dynamics that you just can't copy and paste drills and games. So I wanted to put the content in there. I know the niche was going to be quite small, and I was going to put in quite a lot of time and effort into recording webinars and producing content and lesson plans and practice designs and practice design videos and filming lessons and uploading lessons. So I decided to rebrand and reconstruct the whole website from scratch. I did look at some website builders, and the price was just really scary, and there's no way I could afford that much outlay. So I decided to build it all myself and invested quite a lot of money to try and make sure it was the best possible website it could be. And I'm pleased to say, at the time of recording, we have over 100 coaches, which again might not sound like a lot, but to me that was a target by the end of the year, to have 100 coaches join, sign up, explore, enjoy the content. And we've achieved that goal, and 100 coaches from around the world now regularly, daily, log into my website and consume information. And that might be educational information like a webinar or a masterclass where they can watch me coach. They can download some practice designs for ideas. We recently, over the past couple of weeks, launched a community area as well, a bit like a social media page where coaches can interact and share videos and share links and talk to each other. So that was a big undertaking. It's been a lot of hard work over the past 12 months. It's been a lot of late nights and early mornings, a lot of mistakes as well. And that's gave me a whole new set of skills, such as videoing, editing, designing websites, designing copy for websites, marketing, promotion. And that was a big part of my social media as well going into 2024. I really wanted to make sure my social media changed, and that was the third goal. So we had the coach conferences, we had the website, and then my social media presence. So I really wanted to make sure I was a little bit unique with my social media. I didn't want to fall down the trap like 99.9% of tennis coaches of just putting out drills, games, dancing to trendy music, shaking my finger, telling you what perfect technique is. Because that's not what I believe in as an ecological practitioner, as an ecological coach. Like, those things don't work. Like, I know I could show you a technique, but it's irrelevant. It won't work for you. I didn't want to shadow swing because it's no point. It's pretty pointless. So my social media was all about, okay, I'm going to educate. And I knew going into that, I wouldn't get the views. I wouldn't get the likes. I wouldn't get the shares. I wouldn't get the comments. And that's okay, because it's not about likes, shares and comments. It's not about being given lots of freebies or being jetted off to tennis tournaments around the world because you're a social media influencer. It was more about, no, I'm going to educate. I also knew going into that when you educate, you're going to get some grief as well, especially if I'm coming in from an ecological position and I'm saying traditional coaching is flawed. Don't serve in isolation. It's a waste of time. 99.9% of tennis coaches serve in isolation. So I knew there's going to be pushback on that as well. And that's okay. Like, the whole idea is for me not to say how great I am and look at me, I'm an amazing tennis coach, but it was more about going into it and saying, maybe we can rethink how we serve. We shouldn't be serving in isolation. Why? Because the science and evidence shows us it doesn't transfer. The science and evidence shows us it doesn't actually develop skill in the way we think it does. We get very skilled at serving in isolation, but when you transfer that back into a game, it disappears. And I knew I'd get quite a lot of stick, and I've had quite a few tasty conversations on different social media platforms over the year as well. And that's okay. And people, and I've had this thrown at me before, oh, you only say it to be controversial. You're just saying it to cause debate. You're just saying it for views. You're just saying it for clicks. I'm not. I'm saying it because I want to try and help tennis coaches. I spent 20 years of my tennis career, coaching in effective ways. Coaching in isolation, basket feeding, drop feeding, because that's how I was educated. That's what I was told was good coaching. My peers beside me were doing those things, and I was successful to a small degree doing those things as well. When you look at the evidence and research, it shows that they're not as effective as we believe. So that was the whole idea of the social media. And the social media has helped. It's helped drive traffic to the website. It's helped drive membership to the website. It's raised my profile. And that was a huge goal going into my social media. I knew I wasn't going to be as big as some of the other accounts. And I'm not bashing those accounts either. Listen, if it makes you money, if it gets you to travel the world and gets you lots of opportunities, and absolutely fair play. I just look at things like, is that helping the tennis industry or is it hurting the tennis industry? So I can just think of 2 popular Instagram accounts who shadow swing and give lots of technical advice. Even though it's irrelevant and it won't work from a coaching point of view, is that helping or hurting the tennis industry? Or is that just serving the individual? I'll leave that up to you to decide maybe and have a chat about in the comments. And I decided late this year, after the PTR UK Coaches Conference, to go a bit more into YouTube as well. And I made a commitment for the first couple of months of the summer to record a single video every single day with just me talking to camera about various topics, generally in the car. And that's been well received as well, and the comments have been good, the views have been good. We will maybe talk about this in 2025 in terms of my plans for YouTube going forwards, but that's been quite successful as well. Been a bit more vocal on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is something I never really played around with as well, because it's more business to business, and I never seen that as an important part. But I decided late again this year to just upload daily small articles just on different things. And again, the whole idea was just to raise my profile in front of more stakeholders in terms of business stakeholders or head coaches or conference holders. And again, that's worked out quite successfully as well. And it's definitely raised my profile. Again, I've got into some comments and some great discussions on there as well, especially when I say things like throwing and hitting are 2 different skills, which they are. And again, coaches find that difficult to comprehend because that's not how they've been taught or how they've coached, and again, fully understand that part of it. And they were my main goals over the year. Now, through those goals and chasing those goals and being quite driven to speak at a conference, to develop the website, to build my social media presence, it actually opened up more doors than I thought it ever would. And there's been some success stories on the back of those goals that come through it. Like, currently I am an ASICS Tennis Academy coach, so ASICS support me with clothing and shoes, so huge thank you to ASICS. And I got to spend the day at the ASICS house at Wimbledon and spend the whole day with coaches from around the UK, and yeah, really thankful. And I think that's come off the back of my online presence, because again, people won't know me if I'm not putting myself out there on camera, on social media, on Instagram and stuff as well. So huge thank you to ASICS. I was asked to write a weekly article for Racket Business, which is a huge newsletter in the States. So I write now a regular article for them every single week. Check them out. And again, that's a huge opportunity, and that came off the back of my LinkedIn posts and my blog posts as well. So again, just another opportunity to get my message and my opinions and my ideas out to a wider audience that sometimes you don't get with social media because the way algorithms work. So huge thank you to Tim Farthing for Racket Business. That was a huge opportunity for me as well. And I've been commissioned to write a tennis specific chapter for an academic textbook, which I can't talk too much about because I'm currently writing it and I need to send it off before Easter, April in 2025. But again, huge opportunity to, obviously I've self-published some books as well, and I publish articles and videos, but to be asked to write for an academic textbook. So academic textbook is like evidence and science and research. It's not opinion, it's fact. So that's a huge opportunity for me and something that I never thought I'd ever get. And yeah, a huge thank you to those involved in that. So they were these successes, and I think I pretty much achieved all my 3 main goals. But this year's been a struggle as well. And it's been a struggle more on court than it has off the court. And what I'm going to talk through now is some stuff that I found really quite tough over the past year. What I'm going to talk about now is stuff that, yeah, didn't go so well and I found quite tough. So the first thing that I want to sort of discuss is I've lost a couple of players this year. And a couple of players who I really enjoyed working with, and players who I've spent a lot of time and effort and energy into. And I've talked about these players on the podcast before, so I'm not going to rehash that. But basically, working in an ecological way. sometimes you are the outsider. It doesn't look like traditional tennis coaching. I'm not shouting, I'm not explicit, I'm not showing you technique, I'm not demonstrating, I'm not doing lots of interventions. And that's traditionally what parents think tennis coaching is. And the 2 players that I lost, unfortunately, were good players, competitive players, and the parents decided that they needed more technical coaching. Again, the fear of failure, of not making a regional performance list or not making county training was huge. Lots of comparisons, not only myself to other coaches. I'm thinking, well, that coach looks and feels like a tennis coach because they're explicit. And then you've got Steve, who's implicit, and he's doing these crazy games. He's not basket feeding. I don't see lots of repetition like the other courts. There's a comparison there. And that's hard to take sometimes because, again, I've sat in those meetings with those parents and they've said to me, yeah, but we think Coach X is really, really good because they will talk about technique, do lots of basket drills, do lots of interventions. And I've got to sit down and be professional in that moment. And I could sit there and say, listen, well, that's all really not very effective. Like, I would probably challenge the coach's effect that they're having. It may look very good and bells and whistles, but here's the evidence and the science and the research to show you that that's probably not effective coaching. But I am a professional and I'll sit there, and in both cases I've said, choice is yours. This is how I work. This is how they work. This is why I work this way. And I'll present the evidence in terms of, look, there's more transfer. It's going to stick. It's going to be better longer term. However, the downside to ecological dynamics is it's slow. Learning is non-linear. You're going to have ups and downs. It's going to be a bit chaotic at times. It's not in your face, but that's the way I work. So if you want to go off with your coach, you can do. If you want to stay with me, great. And they both decided to go off with other coaches. And that hurts. And it's tough because I could just go back to how I used to coach. I could just get the basket out. I could just shout random technical phrases like rotate your hips and shoulder over shoulder. Like, I know all the buzzwords because I've coached that way for 20 years. I know how to make it look like I'm teaching. Or I can stick to my values and principles and just say, okay, there's the door. And I did it with both of them. And like I've said in the podcast, and I've done episodes on both cases, I wish them the world. I wish them the best of luck. And I'm hoping it works out for them. And that's quite tough, and that's quite a moral dilemma for me, because it's like, well, how do I work in a traditional world when I'm such an outsider? And it's, again, when I'm working in my centre, it's difficult at times because you've got 5 or 6 coaches who are working in the best they can with what they have. And I don't think any coach goes out there to deliver bad sessions or deliver bad content or deliver ineffective ways. They just go out based on how they've been educated, how they've been taught, how they've been mentored, what additional learning they've done, and they do the best job they can. And I respect that 100%. And I know a couple of the coaches who I work with will watch this video, and at the end of the day, we all coach in different ways. You can coach any way you want. But I believe in the way I coach, and they believe in the way they coach. And sometimes it's oil and water. It's 2 completely different things. It may look the same, but there's 2 different properties. And if I'm putting oil in my car or water in my car engine, I know which one's going to work more efficiently, effectively. Why? Because I've done the research, I've done the evidence. I've also coached the way that those type of coaches coach. And I know it doesn't work. It works, but only for a very small few who just survive. That's the whole survivorship bias. And that's been quite tough as well. And there's been many times where I've thought about leaving my centre and just going off on my own, because it's difficult to work in an environment where you are the outsider and you are the outlier, and people think you're just this crazy coach who does stuff online to be controversial. But I also decided to stay because I like being challenged. And that's not to say that my method is better than the other method, because again, I have confirmation bias as well. I believe that ecological dynamics and constraint-led approach is the way to coach. And that's dangerous as well, because sometimes I might not see other things that might be effective, because no methodology or psychology is 100% foolproof. There's elements of different psychology that you can pull upon. So that's why I've stayed there as well, because I think it's good for me to see other approaches. But it's tough. And I had a mentoring session this week with a coach who is in a similar situation. They want to explore and develop ecological dynamic principles within their coaching, and they're working with other coaches who are just laughing at them, thinking that they're stupid and silly. And that's challenging. That's challenging from a mental health point of view, because it's tough when you're on court and you can see people looking and shaking their head and stuff like that. And you can see parents getting wound up and annoyed. I had it this week with a parent in one of my groups. You could see they were getting really annoyed at my coaching, because again, they don't know any better. They don't know what I'm doing, and maybe that, again, I've said in the past, maybe that's on me not educating them enough. And that's tough. That's tough on tennis coaches. So if you are a tennis coach and you are going down the ecological rabbit hole, like, stick in there, stick to your values, stick to what you believe, and you can see that the tide is changing within tennis coaching. The ITF have done now 2 webinars on ecological dynamics and constraint-led approach. And that's the International Tennis Federation. The national governing body here in the UK now have constraint-based coaching on their level 3 and constraint-based coaching on a CPD, which is a step forward. So again, using constraints to help players improve. That wasn't there 12, 18 months ago. The academic textbook that I talked about before, that's going to be new. Like, there's very little tennis information out there in books. So again, I'm hugely honoured to play a part in that. You then also see another Grand Slam Coaches Conference in Australia in a couple of weeks. You've got some ecological minded coaches like Sean Malcolm, Matt Wiggum, in delivering some content in and around CLA or CLA principles. That's a huge step forward as well. And I definitely felt it more towards the back end of the year. And when I started doing ecological dynamics in tennis 4 years ago, there was no one. I didn't know anybody. And now, like, I was looking at my WhatsApps last night, and I'm in 6, 7, 8 WhatsApp groups with tennis coaches, other sports coaches, some really high level people within tennis who are looking to explore ecological dynamics, and they're talking to me about these things as well. And I'm like, wow, like 4 years ago I had no one. I was literally just scraping around the internet trying to find some information of what this was, and now here I am, and I'm involved in networking with some very high profile people in tennis, in other sports as well, about trying to get more ecological dynamics in tennis, which is just amazing. So if you are an ecological mindset coach and you're getting a tough time, stick in there, because it's hard. It's hard when you're being criticised and people telling you don't know what you're doing and you're just playing games. Or another comment was, I don't think skill just develops in a game. I have to tell them. And again, you have to understand there's a lot of ego involved in tennis. So that was a challenge this year. Another challenge has been just the workload. And there's been a few occasions this year where I've stepped away and I've took time off from creating content. Normally school holidays, because I'm a full-time coach. I still coach 20, 25 hours a week. I design 5 reels, 5 Instagram posts a day, 2 blog posts. I was doing 5 YouTube videos a week, then developing content for my website. It's hard work. It's tough. And that's, I also was doing coach education as well. So I was doing level 1s, level 2s, CPD, coach forums. That's hard work. I'm literally working sometimes 7 days a week, 40, 50 hours a week. And there's times where I had to take a step back and just take a breather. And you'll see it in my social media. There's gaps of like a week here and there where I take a step back. Okay, I'm not coaching for a week. I'm taking a week off. I'm not going to deliver any content. And over the next 2 weeks, over Christmas, I won't be producing any content on any social media platforms because I'm going to take a break. And I think as tennis coaches, we burn out so quick. And I've talked about this again in the podcast, so apologies for repeating myself. But we burn out. we get so tired. We perform every single day. Every lesson we do, we generally perform. It's a performance, energy, enthusiasm, and it's tiring. We're dealing with human beings, quite complex human beings as well, who have emotions, and they have good days and bad days, and that drains off us as well, because we've got to pick people up when they're down, we've got to calm people down, we've got to listen to people's problems and stuff. That's draining as well. And there's times this year where I've took a step back, and previous years I would have just carried on working and then just burnt out and then had some mental health issues like depression, because it's normal. Like when you are going 100 miles an hour, you run out of fuel. And I think that's been it's been a challenge this year, because I still get burnt out. As I'm recording this video, I am so tired. I've literally worked 50 weeks quite solid this year, with a couple of weeks off, like I said. But I'm tired. On court last night, I had zero. I had nothing in me. And lucky enough, I was working with other coaches who could help support me in a group setting. And it's end of term, fun week anyway, so it's not that draining. But I'm tired. I need a week off next week just to get away from tennis. And sometimes we don't appreciate that as coaches. And people don't appreciate it either. People think that our job is easy. We just hit a few tennis balls around. But our job's 24/7. I was talking to a coach last night, like, parents, if you listen to this, parents, you have to respect our job. Texting us at 11 o'clock in the evening, texting us at weekends, trying to pressure us to have lessons over Christmas. Like, we need a break. Coaches, we need a break. We need some time off to recharge. So when we come back on and come back into work in January, we're going to give it 100%. But I think that's always a challenge with tennis coaching, is dealing with the emotional and psychological burnout, and it's real. And I think coaches aren't educated on it enough. And I always find it rather amusing when I speak to young coaches and they're saying, I'm going to do 40 hours a week on court. You will be able to do 40 hours a week on court for a few weeks, and then you'll just just hit the wall, and then you'll probably need some time off. So your average hours over a long period of time will not be averaging 40 hours a week. So that's been a challenge as well. And I think the last challenge is just in and around trying to balance family life. Obviously I've had a baby this year, so over the past 6 months, but it's been quite tough because he will go to preschool in the morning. I go to work before he gets back from preschool. So I spend these long periods of the day where I don't see him. I've been travelling quite a lot this year with County Cup and conferences, tutoring. I've been travelling a lot, probably more this year than I've ever travelled before. And based on potentially 2025, there'll be a lot more travelling involved as well. So that's been quite tough to balance that out. So I've been really quite mindful to try and put in some gaps where I can just stay at home and stay with the baby and see my family and spend time as well. So that's always a challenge for a tennis coach, just balancing that work-life balance. And yeah, I think it's important that we don't just keep chasing lessons or money, because we're generally self-employed. We don't get paid if we don't work. So these 2 weeks off over Christmas, I will not get paid. Luckily enough, at this point, I do have additional revenue streams, which is good. But yeah, just trying to balance out that family life as well is quite tough. So that's been the successes and challenges of 2024. What about 2025? So I'm just going to talk through my goals and aspirations for 2025. First of all, number one, coach conferences. I talked about it at the start of the podcast, but obviously spoke at 3 coach conferences this year. Unfortunately, didn't get international in person. Obviously, I spoke at the Tennis South Africa Coaches Conference, but that was virtual. The plan this year is to do an international coach conference. Again, puts me at my comfort zone. International coaches who don't speak English, and some people say I don't speak English being Scouse, but that's fine. That's going to be a huge challenge as well, and I'm pleased to say that I have provisionally got some international work in the diary, which I can't talk about at the moment. But that's a huge aspiration of mine. Second goal of the year is to keep on improving the website. So you probably see a theme. The goals are very similar to last year, but we're going to try and scale things up as well. So with the website, the plan is to broaden the community elements. So going from just an educational website where people can just go in and consume content, I want it to be more of a peer-to-peer network going forwards, because that's how we learn. I don't have all the answers. I've just got my way and what works for my players. what I want mytenniscoaching.com, especially in my Tennis Coach Academy part of the website, is to become a place where coaches can go, share ideas, feel comfortable sharing videos of lessons, feel comfortable sharing opinions, and not being told they're wrong. And it's been tough because even though I've got 100 coaches in the academy at the moment, very few talk, very few upload and share ideas, and I get it. There's a peer pressure. There's a culture within tennis coaching where people share ideas and told that they're wrong and not very good. And I want to break that down with mytenniscoaching.com and my Tennis Coach Academy as well. So if you're a tennis coach, maybe leave down in the comments why coaches don't share, because I'm really fascinated and I'm still trying to get down to the root of the matter, why coaches don't share. So that's number 2. And number 3, arguably my biggest goal, and it might not come into fruition in 2025, but it's one that I want to get the ball rolling. I want to start working with some federations and trying to change how we coach on a slightly bigger scale. Because it's great if I have an influence on a coach at a club, or if I have an influence on a group of coaches in a certain area. But imagine if we could change a federation's approach and change a whole federation to go more ecological dynamics, ecological psychology. And that's something that I'm really keen on, because I don't want to just make a small impact here. And I sound really egotistic here, but I just want to make a difference. Like, it's great having a small impact in a small area, but to make a bigger impact maybe on a nation or a region, that's something that I'm really keen on as well. But there you have it. What are your goals for 2025? What have you found successful in 2024, and what have been your challenges? Let me know in the comments. If you don't feel comfortable, send me an email, steve@mytenniscoaching.com. I'm always keen to hear, coaches, what you find works, what you find challenging, and that, 1, helps me give out some content, and 2, I can also maybe have a little impact on you as well. As always, if you're watching on YouTube, check out the video on the screen now. Have an amazing holiday season, and I'll see you in 2025.